The rise of the MAGA Make America Great Again movement, fueled by Donald Trump's populist rhetoric, has reshaped American politics in profound ways. While the movement claims to represent the interests of working-class Americans, its policies and priorities often undermine the very people it purports to champion. From a left-wing perspective, the MAGA phenomenon is a case study in how right-wing populism exploits economic anxiety, cultural grievances, and racial resentment to mobilize voters against their own material interests. By examining the policies supported by MAGA and their consequences, it becomes clear that many of its adherents are voting against their own well-being. The myth of populism. At its core, the MAGA movement presents itself as a populist revolt against elites, promising to restore power to the people and revive a bygone era of American greatness. However, this populist rhetoric is deeply misleading. While Trump and his allies rail against the swamp and coastal elites, their policies consistently favor the wealthy and powerful at the expense of working-class Americans. This disconnect between rhetoric and reality is a hallmark of right-wing populism, which uses the language of class struggle to advance an agenda that benefits the ruling class. Economic policies that hurt workers. One of the most glaring examples of how MAGA votes against its own interests is its support for economic policies that exacerbate inequality and harm working-class communities. The 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, a cornerstone of Trump's presidency, is a case in point. While the legislation was marketed as a boon for the middle class, its benefits were overwhelmingly skewed toward corporations and the wealthy. According to the Tax Policy Center, the top 1% of earners receive 20% of the tax cuts, while the bottom 60% receive just 12%. Over time, the law is expected to increase the federal deficit by nearly $2 trillion, potentially leading to cuts in social programs that many MAGA voters rely on. Similarly, the MAGA movement's opposition to labor unions and workers' rights undermines the economic security of its base. Trump's appointments to the National Labor Relations Board (NLRB) and his support for right-to-work laws have weakened unions and eroded collective bargaining power. This has contributed to stagnant wages, declining benefits, and increased job insecurity for millions of workers, many of whom are MAGA supporters. Attacks on health care. Another area where MAGA voters are voting against their interests is health care. The Affordable Care Act (ACA), also known as Obamacare, has expanded access to health insurance for millions of Americans, particularly in rural and low-income areas that are strongholds of MAGA support. Yet, the MAGA movement has consistently sought to repeal the ACA without offering a viable alternative. If successful, this would leave millions of people without coverage, including many who voted for Trump. The COVID-19 pandemic further highlighted the consequences of MAGA's anti-healthcare agenda. Trump's downplaying of the virus, his resistance to public health measures, and his administration's mismanagement of the crisis contributed to unnecessary suffering and death, particularly in communities that supported him. By prioritizing political loyalty over public health, MAGA leaders betrayed the very people they claimed to represent. Environmental policies that harm communities. MAGA's environmental policies are another example of how the movement works against the interests of its base. The Trump administration rolled back dozens of environmental regulations, including protections for clean air and water, in the name of reducing burdensome regulations on businesses. These rollbacks disproportionately affect rural and low-income communities, which are more likely to be located near polluting industries and less likely to have the resources to mitigate environmental harm. For example, the repeal of the Clean Power Plan and the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement not only accelerated the climate crisis, but also undermined efforts to create green jobs and transition to a sustainable economy. Many MAGA voters live in regions that could benefit from investments in renewable energy, yet their support for Trump's anti-environmental agenda has hindered progress in this area. Cultural grievances and racial resentment. While economic and policy issues are central to understanding how MAGA votes against its interests, the movement's appeal cannot be fully understood without considering the role of cultural grievances and racial resentment. Trump's rhetoric often stokes fears about immigration, crime, and the erosion of traditional values, creating a sense of cultural and racial threat among his base. This strategy, known as racialized populism, diverts attention from economic issues and redirects anger toward marginalized groups. By framing issues in terms of us versus them, MAGA leaders are able to mobilize voters around a shared identity rather than shared economic interests. This allows them to push policies that benefit the wealthy while maintaining the loyalty of working-class voters who feel culturally aligned with the movement. In this way, MAGA exploits racial and cultural divisions to secure political power, even as its policies harm the very people it claims to represent. The role of misinformation. The spread of misinformation and disinformation has also played a key role in convincing MAGA voters to support policies that are against their interests. Right-wing media outlets, social media platforms, and political leaders have created an echo chamber in which false narratives about election fraud, climate change, and public health are amplified and reinforced. This has made it difficult for many MAGA supporters to discern fact from fiction, leading them to support policies and candidates that are detrimental to their well-being. For example, the widespread belief in the big lie that the 2020 election was stolen has led many MAGA voters to support efforts to restrict voting rights and undermine democratic institutions. These actions not only harm the broader electorate, but also disenfranchise many of the very people who support them. A left-wing path forward. From a left-wing perspective, the challenge of addressing how MAGA votes against its interests requires a multifaceted approach. This includes building a progressive economic agenda. To counter the appeal of right-wing populism, the left must offer a bold and compelling vision for economic justice. This includes policies like Medicare for all, a living wage, and investments in green energy that create jobs and improve quality of life. Challenging misinformation. Progressives must work to combat misinformation and disinformation by promoting media literacy, supporting independent journalism, and holding tech companies accountable for the spread of false narratives. Addressing cultural and racial divisions. The left must engage with the cultural and racial anxieties that drive MAGA support, not by pandering to prejudice, but by offering an inclusive vision of solidarity and shared prosperity. Strengthening democratic institutions. To restore faith in democracy, progressives must advocate for reforms that make government more transparent, accountable, and responsive to the needs of all people. Conclusion. A call for solidarity. The phenomenon of MAGA voters supporting policies that harm their own interests is a stark reminder of the power of ideology, identity, and misinformation in shaping political behavior. From a left-wing perspective, the task ahead is not just to critique these contradictions, but to offer a positive alternative that addresses the real needs and aspirations of working-class Americans. The fight for economic justice, racial equality, and a sustainable future is a fight for the soul of America. It is a fight that requires solidarity, empathy, and a commitment to the common good. By building a movement that speaks to the material and cultural concerns of all people, we can create a future where no one is left behind and where no one votes against their own interests.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to talk to me outside of this video, outside of live streams, or just join the community and be a part of it, you can do so at HIMediaTV/Discord. Discord links there. We'd love to have you. And given the financial situation of the economy right now, I know this is a tall ask, but if you have the scratch to spare, please consider donating and becoming a supporter at HIMedia.gg/tip. All of our perks are serviced through our Discord channel, including early access videos, exclusive videos, and more. Your generosity is a blessing, and $1 a month is a boon to my mental health. Thank you so very much for watching. I appreciate you, and have a great day.